Tim, welcome, sir.
Great, thanks, Daniel.
Great to see you again. By way of introduction, hello everyone. My name is Daniel Casanas. I'm the head of investments at the SDF. This afternoon, I am so fortunate and privileged for the opportunity to speak with Mr. Tim Draper, the visionary venture capitalist and massive proponent for blockchain innovation. So welcome, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
So at the SDF, we are incredibly pleased that now, through Draper University, Tim and his remarkable team are investing directly in startups building on Stellar. So we could not have asked for a better vote of confidence for Tim and his team. So thank you so much, Tim. So Tim, your track record for being early on things is absolutely legendary. Can you share with us a few experiences that you've had along the way that led you to becoming such a big proponent of blockchain so early on?
Sure. It was really kind of interesting because when it may have been 2004, and I was meeting with this guy from Korea, and the two of us were just talking, and he said that we have he said something like 80% of people from Seoul are playing this game, Lineage. And I said, wow, that's a lot of people playing Lineage. And he said, yeah. And then he said, yeah, I just bought my son a sword. And I said, how is that connected to this Lineage? He said, oh, it's in the game. I spent $40 for a virtual sword, a sword that was just pixels on the screen. And something went off in my head that went, okay, fiat money for digital products, there could easily be digital money. And there were a bunch of games that all had digital money, and I kept my eye on it. And then I thought that digital money would happen as games started to make deals with each other, where you'd say you get Farmville gold for, diamonds from another game or whatever it was. But then Bitcoin showed up, and it created a very secure, knock on wood, very secure system for storing value and a currency that kept perfect records. And so I got very interested, and I invested in something called CoinLab. And I also asked him to buy me $250,000 worth of Bitcoin. And that price was, at the time, he said he could get it to me for $4. And I thought, great. But all sorts of trouble went along with that. He stored the Bitcoin at Mt. Gox. Mt. Gox disappeared all the money. And we were sort of out of luck there. And then with CoinLab, we got, there was a group that was supposed to deliver our chip that was going to mine for the Bitcoin, and it was delayed, and they front ran us, and so it was chaos. And what I thought was, oh well, I guess that was a good experiment. I was excited about digital money, but that experiment must have failed. But on the news that the Mt. Gox guys, the biggest exchange of Bitcoin in the world, disappeared a whole bunch of money, I thought Bitcoin would go to zero, but it only dropped about 15% in value. And since it only dropped about 15% in value, I thought, whoa, people must really need this. I mean, because if there's that kind of a risk to owning it. And so then I did a lot of deep research, and I figured out that, yes, people were trying to buy guns and drugs with it, but it turned out all of them got caught because the blockchain keeps perfect records. But they were also using it for all sorts of interesting purposes, for remittances to their homes in different lands. The big corporations were using it to pay people who were not banked. People who were not banked were using it for their own economies, so they could be a part of the world economy. There were so many good applications that I got very excited, and I started to buy Bitcoin more. And I bought and bought and bought, and then there was a big auction that the U.S. Marshal's Office was holding some confiscated currency or Bitcoin, and there were 9 lots, and I thought, well, everybody around me is bidding, trying to figure out what kind of a discount to market that they're going to get these for, and I thought, well, if they're big, it doesn't really matter what I pay here, whether it's 5% higher or whatever. And so I think I was the only one who bid over market for all 9 lots, and I got them all. And I wasn't really expecting to make that big an investment, but after I just sort of shrugged my shoulders and thought, great. And then Bitcoin went from where I bought it, 632, down to about 180. And during that time, I started Draper University, and I started these classes, and I handed out a Bitcoin to each of the speakers, like these cascacious Bitcoins to each of the speakers who came to speak at Draper University. I thought they were kind of a nice little memento. And they, because they were worth about $180, I thought that was kind of a nice stipend for these people. And, of course, since then, people are saying, well, my speaking fee is now $66,000. But actually, it's even more because those coins are rare and they're worth about $100,000 each. So then they have it was pretty funny because I've run into 2 or 3 of them who said, I ripped my entire house apart looking for that damn thing and I couldn't find it, or I ripped my house apart and I found it. So that was the beginning. That first class of Draper University had the benefit of not just our pledge, which is great, thank you for mentioning that, but also it had the benefit of me just saying, hey, let's bring in all the experts in Bitcoin and let these guys hear about it. And from that class, or from Draper University, came Quantum, Tron, and one of these guys was came up and gave me a big hug, and he said, thank you so much. And I said, for what? And he said, because of you, I learned about Bitcoin, and I bought a bunch with my bar mitzvah money, and now I can pay to start my own business, but my bar mitzvah money of $10,000 became worth $8.
Tim, can we reinstitute this kind of 1 Bitcoin per DraperU participant, because we have about 60.
That's what you were paying me for this.
Yeah, that did happen. So fair enough, fair play. So you touched on a whole bunch of things there that we could spend hours and hours talking about because your history is so fascinating. But there's 2 things that we could drill down on, hopefully. The first is, in the audience today, we have a considerable number of developers that are looking to commercialize their projects and eventually seek venture funding. So you've funded some of the best in the business. What recommendations would you have, specific recommendations for them in terms of starting out on the right foot, such that they can eventually land in front of you as a kind of either a DraperU participant or a Series A participant or later on?
Well, I can quote Elon Musk because we brought that class to meet with Elon, And one of the students from the class raised their hand and said, "Mr. Musk, if I'm thinking of starting a business, what do you recommend?" And this was when he was launching the S car, and he was exhausted. He had brought in the governor. He had this huge launch planned, and you could tell he hadn't had any sleep for 3 days. And he said, "Don't do it." So I think that the best advice I can give you is don't do it. But what that means to an entrepreneur is I am that much more sure I'm going to do it. If you're not an entrepreneur and I tell you don't do it, you're going to go do it. I mean, you're not going to do it. But if you are an entrepreneur and I tell you don't do it, you realize what you're about to go through. It's going to be a major challenge. It's not about the money. It is about the vision and the drive and the way to motivate people to come to your way of thinking and to bring something to fruition.
That's extremely insightful.
If you want to drill down a little bit,
Yeah, please.
I feel like now I'm going to talk about the industry. I feel like people are gravitating toward Bitcoin. Entrepreneurs are gravitating toward Bitcoin the way they gravitated toward Microsoft when they wanted to write software. And I think it's because it's the biggest platform. And I think it's a little harder to write to than some of the other ones, but it has the largest audience. And I'm seeing that it's harder for groups like Stellar to rise above the rest, but Stellar does have some advantages.
Tim,
as do some like Tezos and others, but I do feel like what I'm seeing as a venture capitalist are a lot of great entrepreneurs assuming Bitcoin is going to be the economy of the future. They're hitching their wagon to Bitcoin.
Tim, we just have a short 2 more minutes here, and I wanted to just close on one kind of main question. So Draper University just completed its first Hacker House session of the 4 main sessions, right? So there's a Hacker House that followed by an accelerator, and then next year we're doing another Hacker House followed by another accelerator. The program has been successful thus far. People have been coming back raving about it, and that's thanks to your team, which is so impressive. Financial inclusion is a huge part of Stellar, right? It's in our ethos. And I'm speaking with you in Paris and a few other times. I can tell that that's also a part of your kind of mantra. How can the venture investment community support financial inclusion, using Web3, blockchain, and just Web2, the coming into it, right? How do you best view that happening?
Well, I think crypto generally has allowed us all to be a part of the world economy, whether we have a bank account or not. And I actually think it's the regulators that are, and it's interesting, the politicians encourage more regulation, or many of them do. And what they're doing, and they're speaking out of the other side of their mouth, they're saying we want financial inclusion. Regulations are killing financial inclusion. Regulations are making it harder and harder for somebody to afford a bank account, harder and harder for somebody to get a loan. And so I think fiat is just going to fall under its own weight one day, and people are going to be clamoring to get their dollars out so they can put them into Bitcoin or Stellar or whatever. But I I think if you really want financial inclusion, you got to deregulate. And I don't think government officials understand that, and I think they should. If you want true financial inclusion, you really want this incredible crypto community. You want to be able to buy your food, your clothing, your shelter, and pay your taxes all in Bitcoin.
Tim, that is so insightful. We are out of time, but that last piece on the financial inclusions that regulators need to think more closely about it is so prevalent today. So thank you so much for your time. The one and only Tim Draper.